All right, Nuggets fans, welcome in to Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our good friends over at Bet Online at number 38. I'm your host, Ryan Blackburn at NBA Blackburn on Twitter, part of the Mile High Sports Podcast Network, and I'm excited to talk about the Denver Nuggets Young Guns. There's going to be some interesting conversations to be had about this group, about the plan, about everything facing the Nuggets over the course of the next several years and the plan that Calvin Booth has put together. I'm looking forward to talking about it today. There will obviously be more thoughts about this over the course of the offseason, depending on what the Nuggets decide to do, whether KCP returns, things like that. So should be interesting to see how this conversation evolves, of course, but these thoughts are not going to be like the be all end all. This is my general thoughts on where each of these guys are at and whether the plan is even good, things of that nature. I know everybody's got their own takes on what the Nuggets should be doing. I've certainly got mine. We're going to go over it. We're going to have a good time. It's going to be fun. Of course, I'm Ryan Blackburn over at Mile High Sports. Make sure to check it out. Make sure to check out the writing that I've been doing on the website as well. Mile High Sports have been putting out these season in review, kind of season grades pieces, point guards on Monday, shooting guards on Tuesday, small forwards today. Christian Braun and Michael Porter were the two small forwards that I covered today. Only two small forwards really on the roster, or at least the guys who actually played small forward this year. So thought that was interesting, and I wonder if that changes, wonder if that stays the same. But either way, make sure to go check out some of the writing over at the site. Also, got to pay some bills. This podcast, as you know, it's sponsored by our good friends over at Bet Online, your number one source for the NBA and NHL playoffs this season. Every stat, every matchup, and even live odds while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to the online casino and go get in a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action, and don't forget to use promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, the game starts here. Okay, let's get into this thing. Let's talk about it. So we've got Sup Ryan, love seeing you on the DNVR show today. It comes from 402 Nuggets. Really appreciate it. I always enjoy going on the DNVR show. Those guys are tremendous. They do a great job. And we had a good time. We talked about some off-season goals, some off-season kind of to-do list stuff. So if you're looking for additional Ryan Blackburn content, then go head over to the DNVR show where I was today. Also might be appearing on Saturday as well. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. And then Grace asks, did P-Watt not also play some minutes at the 3? He did, but he played more minutes at the 4. And that's just kind of how I was quantifying this thing. The position that you played the most, that's going to be where I'm going to discuss you. So Aaron Gordon and Peyton Watson, 2 power forwards. And then the 3 power forwards that didn't play at all this year, Hunter Tyson, Braxton Key, and Vlatko Čančar, obviously due to injury. Those 3 I'll talk about in passing, but it'll mostly be about Aaron Gordon and Peyton Watson tomorrow. So will be interesting to talk about that. Okay, let's get into this conversation. Going to be very interesting to see. I was going to talk about Christian and Peyton in the first segment. 2 young guys that played the most amount of minutes, that had the most amount of success this year. Obviously, they were both in the 2022 draft. They've been in the system for longer than some of the other guys. Not all of them, but some of the other guys. And so let's start with Christian and Peyton. I want to basically do that. I'll talk about Zeke Nnaji and the 3 rookies in the second segment. And then in the third segment, we're going to basically go over, is the plan good? Is this a good plan? Christian Braun. This year, I did write about him earlier today. So if you want to go check out some extended thoughts, then definitely go do so. Christian Braun started off this season, and I thought that he was pressing a little bit too much. Going from his first year to his second year, I thought that Christian Braun was a little bit shaky in some things. He didn't shoot the ball as well, but More importantly, the details just weren't great with him. He wasn't finishing around the rim that well. He wasn't playing as well defensively. He got away from what got him minutes in his first year and earned him a playoff rotation role. And it took a conversation with Michael Malone, a refocusing from Christian Braun on what he's good at, just focusing on the easy stuff. And then he started playing much better. Shot 42% from three in his post All-Star break stretch. Also shot better from two, most importantly, because he cut out some of the bad shots. Just going and looking at some of the shots that he took from his rookie to his sophomore season. Rookie season, he didn't take that many shots from 3 to 10 feet, kind of in that floater zone. Sophomore year, this year, he took a lot. He took a lot where he couldn't get all the way to the rim, tried to finish with either a floater or an up and under, or trying to get to a layup, but couldn't really get all the way to the rim, and it was contested. And he shot like 36% or somewhere around in that fashion from 3 to 10 feet this year. It's not good enough. Obviously, you need somebody who can finish with a little bit more efficiency, especially somebody who's as athletic as Christian Braun is. So that's something that he is going to need to improve to be better and in order to play a more consistent role. But the most important thing that he did was he got back to the basics. He was trying to expand his game, I think, in the first half of the season, do some different things, DHOs, pick and rolls, not as much of the pick and roll, but just maybe isolating a little bit. And there were too many possessions that were bad, and he cut a lot of those out when he got to the second half of the season. And that was a really good thing for him. It was a good thing for his plus minus. It was a good thing for the Nuggets bench. And he actually had a positive plus minus in the post All-Star break portion. Now, a lot of people did, but it is notable for Christian Braun, especially because he comes off the bench, and Denver's bench never has a positive plus minus. So I thought that was very interesting. Then you get to the playoffs, and Christian doesn't make a three against the Lakers. He makes more threes and plays a little bit more consistently and plays pretty well against the Minnesota Timberwolves, and actually proves to be their best defender against Anthony Edwards and some of these more athletic, springy, physical defender or offensive players. Maybe that's where Christian Braun really fits in. Now, in the playoffs, as a whole, he shot 4 of 18 from three. That's obviously not good enough. And if he wants to be the starting shooting guard for the Nuggets going forward, he's going to have to shoot better than 4 of 18. It's just pretty simple. That's not a hot take, in my opinion. He's capable of doing some of the other stuff. Denver, if they were to replace Kentavious Caldwell-Pope with Christian Braun, he's not far off from being just about as impactful. And the reason is because Denver doesn't need their fifth starter to be so good in a variety of areas. They just need them to be excellent in a couple of different areas. And Christian's already got some good traits as a defender, and he's going to get better as he learns how to do it, as he understands the nuances of the game and can really read things. He's already starting to do that better than most rookies and young players, but I think that he's on track to be a borderline starter for much of his career. I'm higher on him than some folks. I'm lower on him than some folks, but I think that that's where his future kind of lays, and it's up to Denver as to whether they think that that is good enough for him to be a starter on a championship team, because there's a difference between being a starter on a rebuilding team, a starter on a playoff team, and a starter on a championship team. Can Christian Braun be that? I don't know. I don't think his skills are well-rounded enough in order to really make that happen. So I'm very curious to see how it evolves going forward. We will find out. Peyton Watson is, of course, the other young guy that you got to talk about as the main players here. Peyton Watson was very good for much of the season. You go back and look through his splits over the course of the year, and his consistency, other than like his shooting percentage, like his three-point percentage, everything else is pretty consistent. Like his defensive effort and impact, just a lot of good things that he accomplished over the course of this season. Let me just go and look at the plus minus by month. October plus 6.2, November minus 11.3. That was his worst month as a pro. He didn't make a 3 if you remember. 0 of 7 from 3 in the month of November, 44% true shooting. Not good. Plus 1.2 plus minus in December, minus 1.5 in January, minus 7.4 in February, minus 1.5 in March, plus 1.6 in April. February was a tough month for the Nuggets because they were kind of coming in and out of the All-Star break. There were some guys that were in and out of the rotation a little bit. Peyton was okay during that stretch. He shot 45% from 3, but it was only 9 of 20. Only 6 steals during that time. There's some indications that he kind of fell off at various points. But I will say that for the vast majority of the year, I was impressed with what Peyton Watson accomplished. Defensively, he's one of those guys that you don't need to teach a lot in order to be good because he's got the natural traits that you're always looking for from a positive defender. And being 6'8" with long arms and athleticism and strength and doing some great things, he was awesome throughout much of the year. Now, the offense is a different story as I continue to read the chat here. I am plus 24 and plus 30 in Grace's heart. Thank you. I appreciate it. I think in general that Peyton Watson has a trajectory that is built for starting. Probably even more so than Christian. Christian's one of those guys that is going to be stable. He can play a variety of different roles. He feels like a spot starter. Peyton Watson feels like somebody who is going to start and be a consistent starter for a team as like a role player next to a star or a couple stars. And that's going to make a lot of sense for him because he's going to be one of the best defenders that you can get on the open market, or not the open market, but like one of the best possible defensive players that you can add to a starting 5. And for Denver, that's something that they're going to have to hold in their back pocket. I think that Peyton, unfortunately, he didn't play during the playoffs. It's really hard to get a gauge on why that was, because I think he could have played. I really do. I think that he was capable. I didn't think there was any reason why he couldn't have played against the Timberwolves when other guys could have. Like, it's not like a lot of those other guys were providing a ton of extra spacing. And it might have saved players like Aaron Gordon and Nikola Jokic some actual breathing room if they were able to get a rest and Peyton Watson comes in and you just try to defend. He's the one guy that they never really tried on Anthony Edwards. And I wonder if putting him on Anthony Edwards might have actually helped some things. So I don't know. It is a tough call. I'm curious as to why Mike Malone didn't do it, and probably should have asked him flat out, like, hey, why didn't Peyton Watson play? But he's going to play next year. And I would honestly be shocked if he didn't play more. He is going to be, in my opinion, between KCP, Michael Porter, and Aaron Gordon, I think that Peyton Watson is the most likely guy to enter the starting lineup, especially a starting lineup that is built around Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray, because those guys don't need a ton of offense. But Peyton Watson can create a little bit. He can see the floor a little bit. He can do some things. And that's going to be his next skill development aspect. Like, there are going to be some things that he can do as a playmaker, as a pick and roll guy, a DHO guy. But if he can work on that shot a little bit, if he can improve as a shooter, there's going to be some really interesting things that the Nuggets can do with both he and Christian Braun. Brown took some steps as a three-point shooter this year. I wouldn't be surprised if he took a little bit of a step back because I don't necessarily trust his shooting as much, With Peyton, I don't necessarily trust his shooting either, but it wouldn't surprise me if he had like a year where he shot 35%, and then he just kind of hovers around the 33 to 35% range. That's just kind of what I expect with him. But Denver doesn't need that crazy of a shooting percentage. They just need somebody who can be dynamic as a defender and connect. I think it's a lot like what Aaron Gordon does, in my opinion. So I'm curious to see what he does. I'm curious to see what he looks like. And I think that there is a lot to like about both Christian Braun and Peyton Watson within the future of the Nuggets. Whether it makes sense with the kind of team that the Nuggets are building, that remains to be seen. Let's take a break. When we come back, we are going to chat about the rest of the plan, the 4 other players that I would consider in the young category for the Denver Nuggets rebuilding project. We will be back. But first, I got to tell you about number 38, the home base for the Denver Nuggets, Mile High Sports, Colorado Avalanche, Denver Stiffs kind of conglomerate here, doing some great things, serving brunch, serving pizza, serving hot chicken sandwiches, lots of great, awesome food options over at number 38 to go with a great list of pitchers, of beers on tap, seltzers, you name it. There's a lot of different things that you can go get over there, and the atmosphere is incredible. It's in the Rhino District. Make sure to go check it out at number 38 and go sit out on the back lawn, especially as we get into summer. Beautiful day today, and I think that you would enjoy the atmosphere over at number 38. We'll be right back on Pickaxe and Roll. And we're back. Pickaxe and Roll, Ryan Blackburn here. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning into the show. Appreciate all the love and support on the podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe to the YouTube video if you're watching along. If you're on the audio side, make sure to leave a rating and a review. I would love to see some positive reviews come in, especially as we get into the offseason. Let people know that you're still listening to the show. All right, let's get into it. By the way, I'm hearing some things about, like, Tu Maradu says, Ryan, do you think Jay Huff is a playable option down the line, or is it not worth it at all? I wasn't really going to chat about the two-way contract guys because I don't necessarily think that they're in the long-term plans for Denver. And it's hard for me to say one way or the other whether Jay Huff is actually an option, whether Colin Gillespie is actually an option. Braxton Key, guys like that. They just didn't play. Like, we didn't see them at all. And I just don't necessarily think that Denver should be committing to too many guys. So I don't necessarily consider it that much. Denver needed a backup center at various points this year. And the fact that they did not go to Jay Huff at all, I think should be your indication that he's probably not within the purview of what the Nuggets are trying to do. That would be my guess. Okay. Let's get to some of the other young guys. Zeke Nnaji, Julian Strawther, Jalen Pickett, and Hunter Tyson. We're going to talk about all of them in segment 2. Zeke Nnaji played less than 600 minutes this last year. If you go to his basketball reference page and look at the amount of minutes that he's played in previous seasons, this was the second fewest minutes that he's played in his career, despite it being the most games. 397 minutes in his rookie year, 698 in his sophomore year, 728 in his third year. And then after signing a contract extension with Denver, just 576 minutes this year. Back-to-back years where he shot 26% from 3. His free throw percentage is climbing a little bit back. It was 80% in his rookie season, but then it turned to 63, 64, and 67% in consecutive years. What I will say, what I will give him credit for, and what I don't think enough people have really given him credit for, he turned into a really good rim protector for the Nuggets. Really good. He was really solid. And with the hustle that he gave, the ability to switch, There are reasons to think that Zeke Nnaji can be a valuable NBA player in his life. There's absolutely reasons. It didn't work in Denver, or it hasn't worked so far in Denver for sure. And I think the reason is more to do with the offense than it is with the defense. The offense, Zeke's hands are horrible. They are so bad. And his finishing around the rim has really suffered as a result. He's not comfortable. He doesn't have moves. He doesn't really go to anything in particular. And the 3-point percentage has dried up. The issue they run into with Zeke is that it's 6'9", 240, 245 pounds. He gets pushed around on the defensive glass, and as much of an impact as he can make on the ball as a rim protector, switching onto guys, doing some interesting things, when he's asked to rebound, he struggles. He really does. Here are the most number of rebounds that he's had in a game so far, or not so far, but like in this past season. He had 7 rebounds, 5, and then what is that? 7 games with 4 rebounds. Obviously, he doesn't play a lot, but when you are a backup center, you have to be impactful on the glass. And he just wasn't. Now, he was impactful on the offensive glass. That's still a skill of his that he does a pretty good job with. But that's not the issue. And Denver can't just rely upon that as their source of offense from Zeke Nnaji. He needed to be better handling the ball, finishing through traffic, and his true shooting was just abysmal at 52.8%. He had 3 consecutive years where he was in the 61 to 62 range. This past year was not good. And now Denver has a decision with him where they have to figure out what they're going to do with a guy who's under contract for 4 years. His actual contract isn't that bad. The problem is the number this year, and a team is probably not going to want a commitment to him long term. Like, they'd rather just have a flyer. But I wonder if they can move him. I wonder if that's the way, like, just the best way to go is to try to find a clean break for what they're supposed to do. And I think that there is a possibility that they're able to do that. Now, here is a couple stipulations about trading Zeke Nnaji. He is currently on a poison pill, which means that right now it's very hard to trade him in this league year. I was just on the DNVR show, and Harrison Wynn brought up a trade where you pair his salary, like his upcoming salary, with Reggie Jackson, and you try to get somebody who's a good combo guard, like a Bogdan Bogdanovic or a Jordan Clarkson or somebody like that. See if you can find something. The problem is that if you do it in this calendar year, the poison pill is still active. So it would be really difficult to find a team that actually has the space to take him. And the big issue for Denver is that he's actually a salary that's worth like $4.5 million as opposed to the 8.8 that he's actually making next year. So it's a really tough position that the Nuggets find themselves in with trying to move him, because if they have to wait until the next calendar year, then the CBA kicks in, then you can't aggregate salaries, and Denver isn't able to combine his salary with Reggie Jackson if the Nuggets end up over the super tax apron. So that's going to be a problem. It's very, very tough. Grace, the league year changes on July 1st. Always does. That's the one good thing about the NBA is they're very rigid about when the league changes over. It is July 1st when the new CBA goes into effect. I'm curious as to whether that means that, hey, Zeke's probably just going to be back, whether Denver can't move him, whether if they have to move him, then they might be attaching some assets. What does it look like? Can they find the right actual fit for him? I don't know what the answer is. So I think if you're Denver, you got to be open to the possibility that Zeke Nnaji comes back. And I'm not sure that fans are going to want to hear that. So we will see what happens. Maybe a team, especially a rebuilding team, could value him and what he does. I could see a team like Portland. I was looking at some salaries earlier, I was looking at some fits. I could see a team like Portland, who's very, very young, whose front court is just very, very bad uh, around DeAndre Ayton. I could see them trying to add somebody like him on a long term, kind of mid level deal. So we'll see what happens. Next is Julian Strawther. Julian Strawther, pretty good rookie year in some aspects and pretty man some others. Ultimately, he played the 28th most minutes in his draft class. He was the 29th overall pick, played the 28th most minutes. A lot of that was due to getting injured. And then he had that sprained MCL. When he came back, he just wasn't really the same. It took him a while to actually get back. I think that that's going to be an interesting storyline for Denver next year. Assuming they don't trade Strawther, assuming he doesn't like get packaged in a deal to go get somebody else. I think that he's going to be one of Denver's potentially most interesting bench guys next season. I don't know if Denver's going to be able to get the players that they want to. And so they might have to settle for players that aren't as good and might have to just rely on internal development. So if you're relying on the internal development of Christian Braun, Julian Strawther, Peyton Watson, guys like that, who is the guy that you think is most ready to help on the offensive end? I think it might be Strawther. I think it might be him. The real interesting thing with him is he did not shoot well. He didn't shoot the ball that well at all this year. He played 33 of the first 36 games for this Nuggets team and was in the rotation, at least on the fringes. Unfortunately, he shot 29.7% from three on the season. And if I go by the splits, let me just see if that pulls up here real quick. October, he shot 40%, November, 31%, December, 33%, February, 6 games, he shot 10%, March, 20%, April, 33%. So he was okay as kind of a gunner early on in the season. And I wonder if he would have developed a little bit more consistency going forward. He didn't ultimately do that. But he did do some other things. He made some good defensive plays. He was a hustler. If you remember, he tried to contest Victor Wembanyama at the rim in one game and earned some street cred for that. He stole the ball 4 times against the Atlanta Hawks when I was going back and looking through some game film and some different stats from him, some interesting things. The Atlanta Hawks game, that's one that you should pull back up of his back in, I think, December. He had some good moments, and he can run the DHO a little bit. He can run off of screens, catch the ball, fire really quickly, but he can also drive. And I wonder if he's a guy that Michael Malone would be willing to play. And this is going to be part of the third segment. Michael Malone going to have a challenge next year. Astrid says, challenge Malone more than anyone else. I think that a guy like Strawther would be very interesting. Denver was already, and Michael Malone was saying this early in the season, they were drawing more out of bounds, like timeouts, ATOs, excuse me. They're drawing up more ATOs for Strawther than anybody else on the roster, including Michael Porter, including Jamal Murray, including Jokic. Like, it was for Strawther because often Denver had to take timeouts when they were with their bench unit, that's for sure. But it's interesting to me that I think Malone would be interested in playing Julian, trying to get him going. And I think he's that blend of hustler and scorer and actual talent that the Nuggets might need. Now, that could be wishful thinking, and we're going to find out. I'm very, very curious. So we will see what ultimately happens, but it would not surprise me if Julian Strawther played a pretty consistent role next year. And maybe he just doesn't, because that's just kind of how the cookie crumbles. We'll find out. Jalen Pickett, Hunter Tyson are the final two guys. They didn't really play, and I'm not surprised that they didn't play. Reggie Jackson played 82 games. That I was surprised by. I figured that Jalen Pickett would play a little bit more in place of Reggie. I don't think that the plan initially was for Reggie to play 82. Michael Malone decided that he needed some veteran savvy, some guys that he could trust. And even over Jalen Pickett, he played Colin Gillespie, who's on a two-way contract, which I did not agree with in the moment. And I still don't really agree with now, after having watched Colin, who's Facu Campazzo. I think that Jalen can play. I think that there are some good things that he does. I think that the speed of the game and the athleticism of the game was a little bit too quick for him. And the same can be said for Hunter Tyson, who just looked like a little bit of a deer in the headlights when he first got onto an NBA court. Played pretty well in Summer League, but I do think that both of those guys, they're going to have to go back to Summer League. They're going to have to shine, and then they're going to have to be aggressive when it comes to trying to go get some playing time for this team. I thought that, hey, Hunter Tyson, Michael Mullen actually made some commentary about this. He doesn't he takes every shot. Every time he has an opportunity, he absolutely took a bunch of shots. And I think that it would be nice to see him continue to be aggressive in that moment, but he's got to convert. He's got to convert on those opportunities, and he's got to hustle. I'm worried about the defense with Hunter Tyson because I just don't think he's athletic enough. And with Jalen Pickett, kind of the same thing. But I'm curious as to what happens there. He can play. Jalen's smart enough to play. He's savvy enough to figure it out. The real question is whether he will get the opportunity, whether he'll be the third point guard next year. I think that Denver should go into next season with him not playing. That doesn't make it. It makes more sense to find somebody who's just really good immediately. But I could see Jalen Pickett trying to find some time, and Denver should be more open to playing him than they were this past year. Let's take a final break. When we come back, we are going to chat about whether this plan by Calvin Booth was a good one or not. I think it's a very interesting question. We'll be right back on Pickaxe and Roll. We're back. Final segment, Pickaxe and Roll. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. I will be live again on Friday nights. We'll see whether it's at about the 9 o'clock hour or not. Trying to figure out exactly what the best time is to do all of this because, it's in my off season as well. I'm trying to figure out when, living my own life and enjoying the off time a little bit. But I think the Friday night will be the next one. And that'll be about the vets. That'll be about not just Aaron Gordon and KCP, but also DeAndre Jordan, Justin Holiday, Reggie Jackson. So we'll cover those guys then. But now let's get into the main question here. Is this plan even good? Is this a good idea that the Nuggets have decided to do? Calvin Booth, when he took over, he made a commitment to continue to add to the pipeline of Nuggets young talent. Drafted Christian Braun, drafted Peyton Watson. Those decisions both worked out. Denver won a championship, and Christian Braun played a part in it. And Peyton Watson was very much a developmental piece that looked good by the end of the season. And I think everybody had a feeling that he would play a role in this season after the championship. And he was good, and it made sense. And Denver did a good thing. So Calvin Booth kind of doubled down on that decision. And this was lauded and criticized, but mostly lauded by a lot of people as forward thinking, especially with the CBA the way that it is. Drafting 3 separate rookies. He made multiple trades, including a trade during last year's NBA Finals, in order to get Julian Strawther, Jalen Pickett, Hunter Tyson. Those guys, as you know, combined to play about 700 minutes this year. They didn't really play. Michael Malone probably would have played Julian Strawther if he was healthy for the entire time, but he also probably would have cut him from the rotation. I don't think anybody's really surprised that happened. I think it was the right call. But with the other guys and with Denver in this moment trying to win another championship, was it the right call to add more young guys? Because I've mentioned 6 different players: Christian Braun, Peyton Watson, Zeke Nnaji, Julian Strawther, Jalen Pickett, Hunter Tyson. Ultimately, 2 of those guys played a role in the regular season. I guess 3. You could count 3 because Zeke Nnaji played half of a role. Julian Strawther played half of a role. And then in the playoffs, only 1 of those guys played. You had Denver's starting lineup, the starting lineup that they've put so much money into. And then you had a veteran minimum in Justin Holiday. And you had Reggie Jackson, who was the taxpayer MLE. He took over the taxpayer MLE from this past year. That's not a surprise. It's not a surprise to me at all. And I think if Michael Malone had another veteran minimum guy this year, whether it was, actually, I don't really want to speculate that much, but Eric Gordon signed with the Phoenix Suns for the veteran minimum this last offseason. Somebody like Gordon Hayward was a buyout guy that OKC was able to get. Neither of those guys ultimately helped the teams win a championship, but it's that mindset of finding older players that have been around the block a little bit, that are pretty comfortable filling a role, especially at this stage of their career, that it might not be the worst idea in the world to have more of those guys and fewer young guys. And I think that that's a pretty sound strategy too, because I just don't know when Michael Malone is actually going to commit to playing a whole bunch of young guys at once. And I don't think that it's reasonable to expect him to do that. Like, he's already playing 4 of those 6 guys. Like, he played Zeke Nnaji, he played Julian Strawther, and there were times where the bench lineup, like if you go full bench, was Reggie, Julian Strawther, Christian Braun, Peyton Watson, Zeke Nnaji. And you had 4 of those guys who were like in the 22 to 23-year-old range. And then Reggie Jackson trying to tie it together. And no surprise, that lineup was not good. Obviously, there are limitations. There are reasons why the Nuggets are going with this strategy. They are trying to keep their starting lineup together. And I think that's a reasonable thing to do. When you've got the starting lineup of the team that won the championship, it's very reasonable to say, you know what, we're not going to break that up. We are instead going to try to piece together the bench. As a result, they let go of Bruce Brown. They let go of Jeff Green. Both of those guys walked for money reasons, not necessarily playing time reasons, but money reasons. And the Nuggets instead went very cheap. They went about as cheap as you could possibly go. Their 6th highest paid player this year was Reggie Jackson at $5 million. I don't necessarily think money is an object for Denver. Josh Kroenke says that he's willing to go into the second tax apron. The problem is it's kind of hard for them to do that, at least to the degree that it makes sense to go into the tax apron. You would want to go in there for like going deep and have another like true blue 6th man, have another veteran that you could bring in and be very it makes sense to just stack your team as much as possible. But because of the way that Denver's starting lineup is taking up so much of their money, they can't do that. So part of the plan, and Calvin Booth hasn't verbalized this, but this is part of the plan, is for at least one of those young guys to be a permanent starter for the Nuggets by the start of not this coming season, but the season after that, 2025, 2026. He hasn't said that out loud. He hasn't told me that off record or anything like that, but I just know where to follow the money. I understand how this thing goes. And as Denver is forced to really deal with their own mortality and the starting lineup that they have, it currently makes $152 million out of the $176 million the Nuggets paid to their roster this year. That's a lot of money. And I talked about their half-life when I talked about Jokic, Murray, and Porter on Monday night. The same thing is true with this group, where some of these young guys, they're going to end up being pretty solid. I don't know if any of them are going to be like amazing stars or anything like that. I'd actually bet against all of them being stars. But there's a possibility that, let's say it's Christian Braun, let's say it's Peyton Watson. Hell, it could be Julian Strawther. Those guys could be good enough that they can replace one of the starters in Denver without much of an issue. And that's how you get cheaper. And then Denver trades one of their starters or breaks up their starting five into much smaller, manageable salaries. And then that's how you keep your circle of life going. If you're a contender, you need one of these young guys to pan out and actually be good enough to deserve it. Now, that is a bet, and it's a long-term play. And it's one where, in order for those guys to be ready to do that, to be ready to take the reins, Michael Malone has to continue to play them. He's got to be willing to bite the bullet, as it were, for getting a whole bunch of regular season wins. And I'm not sure if he should want to do that. I'm not sure if he should want to make that happen, because I think that there is a clear backlash to that, where you get years like Denver had this past season, where they're trying to piece together a starting lineup that is clearly tired, that's clearly gassed. But guys like the six that I've listed, Christian Braun, Peyton Watson, Zeke Nnaji, Julian Strawther, Jalen Pickett, Hunter Tyson, those six are not fully ready to assume like starting level responsibility and minutes and real rotation power and whatnot. And so Denver couldn't give that to them. They had to rely on their starters, and the starters, unsurprisingly, got tired. So Calvin Booth, I don't remember where it was said. I think Calvin Booth said that this was going to be the most difficult year, because you got 3 rookies in, you've got a bunch of young guys in. This was going to be the bridge year, the most difficult year for Denver to win a championship of this grouping. And I can understand why he says that, because the young guys weren't quite ready to contribute. They're going to have to get ready to contribute next year. And if they can't, that's really where things get dicey. That's where things get pretty difficult. So I look at this group. I look at this group over here, and I think that Christian Braun's ready. I think that Peyton Watson's ready. And I think that Julian Strawther's ready too. I really do. I think that there is, like, as ready can really be for a young guy trying to learn. I think that Julian Strawther can do some things. Now, those are 3 wings. They're different wings, but Christian and Peyton are similar enough that there's some overlap there. Obviously, Julian is 6'7", Christian Braun is 6'6", 6'7", Peyton Watson 6'8". So there's some positional overlap there, and that might be difficult for them to all get reps. So it would have been nice if Zeke Nnaji were ready. It would have been nice if Jalen Pickett was ready. And maybe they end up being so. Maybe they can bounce back and find some things, figure some things out. But I just went on the DNVR show and was like, hey, my 2 top priorities outside of re-signing KCP are a backup point guard or backup combo guard, and then a backup center. And I stick by that. I don't think that Denver can wait for all of the young guys to pan out. I think that is folly. I think that's a really, really dumb decision. And you have to capitalize on having Nikola Jokic at this level. Now, I can say all of those things, and there's going to be really tough for Denver to convert on some of those things too. Like, it's going to be difficult to bounce back. But I think they can do it. And I think Christian Braun and Peyton Watson specifically can really help. You got to believe in them. You got to let them work through some stuff. But if they do end up growing into pretty impressive, maybe even starting caliber players, that helps Denver tremendously. because the Nuggets need to be able to rest some of their guys. They need to be able to trust some of these young guys when the going gets rough. Trust that they're not going to let go of the rope. And I think that Michael Malone, during this season, kind of held onto the wheel a little bit too much. Just a little bit too much. And it would be smart of him to continue to blend those lineups a little bit, to trust that those guys can play with the starters, with the stars, and figure it out from there. I think that they can do it. And I think that Calvin Booth is right about that piece of the plan. Now, the piece of the plan that has Jalen Pickett, Hunter Tyson, and Zeke Nnaji, we'll figure out. Let's see what happens in Summer League. Let's see what happens in the offseason. I don't think that Denver can go into the next season with those guys in line for serious playing time. You got to make some people earn it. And who knows? Maybe they can. Everybody, that is going to do it for this episode of Pickaxe and Roll, brought to you by our friends over at Bet Online and number 38. Thank you for being a great chat. Thank you for being a great audience today. Really appreciate you stopping by. Like I said before, I'm going to be live on Friday night as well. Maybe around the same time, maybe a little bit earlier, because after all, it is Friday night, and I'd like to enjoy my life. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. Appreciate all the love and support on the podcast as always. Please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We'll talk to you guys very soon.